She did not look back. Daniel had told her not to, and for once in her life, Chidinma Zola obeyed, without argument, because the alternative was standing on that roof and watching whatever was about to happen. So she ran, her son's hand crushed in hers, down the east stairwell 2 steps at a time, the brass key biting so hard into her other palm it drew a thin line of blood she would not notice until hours later. Above her, somewhere, a man she had spent 12 years hating was buying their lives with his own. She could hear nothing over her own heartbeat. She told herself that was mercy. Ethan did not cry. He simply held on, his small face pale and set, and she loved him so fiercely in that moment it frightened her. They burst out of the fire door into the rain, and a car was already waiting. Engine running, rear door swinging open, and for one heart-stopping second Chidinma froze, certain she had run straight into Marcus Hahn's hands. Then the driver turned, and she recognized the face. It was one of Daniel's men, an older Korean man with kind, tired eyes she had seen once before, years ago, watching her from across the street she had thought was empty. She understood then, in a rush, that Daniel had been telling the truth about all of it. Even the watching, even the years. He told me to get you both somewhere safe, the man said quietly. Please. There is very little time. Every instinct screamed at her to go back, to climb those stairs, to stand beside the man who had just traded himself for them a second time. But Ethan's hand was in hers, and a mother does not get to choose herself. So she put her son in the car, and she climbed in after him, and she pressed the bleeding key to her chest, and she let the door close. As they pulled away, she looked up, once, at the roofline high above, black against the storm. She saw nothing, and somehow that was worse than anything. Back on the roof, the rain had turned to a fine cold mist, and 2 men who had circled each other for 12 years finally stood with nothing left between them. You let her go, Marcus Hahn observed, almost disappointed. Sentiment, Daniel. I warned you it would ruin you. You came for me, Daniel said. Here I am. That was always the deal. My life, and you leave the rest of the world alone. So take it. Hahn studied him for a long moment, and then he did something Daniel did not expect. He smiled, slow and cold, and he shook his head. No, Hahn said softly. Not tonight. Tonight, I want you to understand something first. Tonight, I want you to know why. And that was the first crack in everything Daniel thought he knew. For 12 years, he had believed this was about debt, about money and territory, and the cold arithmetic of his family's old sins. He had built his entire sacrifice on that belief, had walked away from the only woman he ever loved because of it. But there was something in Marcus Hahn's eyes now that had nothing to do with money, something older and more personal and infinitely more dangerous, and Daniel felt the ground of his own story shift beneath his feet. Why? Daniel said slowly. What do you mean, why? Hahn's smile did not waver. You never asked, he said. In 12 years, you never once asked why it was you I chose to destroy. Across the city, in a small safe flat with the curtains drawn, Chidinma sat her exhausted son on the edge of a narrow bed and finally let herself breathe. Ethan was asleep within minutes, the deep sudden sleep of a child whose body simply refuses any more of a night like that. She sat beside him and watched him, and only then, in quiet, did she open her hand and look at what Daniel had pressed into it. A small brass key, old, worn smooth, with a number stamped into it she did not recognize. And clinging to it, a scrap of paper, folded tight, damp at one corner with the blood from her own palm. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. The note was in his handwriting. She would have known it anywhere, even after 12 years, even shaking, even in the dark. It was short. It was the kind of thing a man writes when he is not sure he will live to explain it in person. If you are reading this, I could not tell you myself. The key opens a box that holds the truth about the night I left. All of it, the part even you do not know. Whatever happens to me, do not let Han near the boy. And know that leaving you was the hardest and the only brave thing I have ever done. Forgive me, or do not, but live. Chidinma pressed the note to her mouth and, for the first time in 12 years, she let herself grieve a man who is not even dead yet. She was done running. She understood that with a sudden cold clarity. She had run for 12 years from him, from the truth, from her own heart, and she was finished. Whatever was in that box, whatever the truth of the night he left, she was going to know it, and then she was going to get the father of her child off that rooftop alive if it was the last thing she did. But first she had a call to make, to the one person on earth she trusted with her son's life. If you have ever loved someone so much it made you brave in a way you did not know you had in you, then you already understand the woman she was becoming. And before we go further, I need 30 seconds of your time, because it matters. If this story is holding you the way it is holding me, do one small thing before we go on.
Top subscribe.
This channel lives and dies by whether you are here, and every subscriber tells me that these stories, these characters, this care is worth it. It is the difference between this being the last one you ever see from me and there being 100 more. So, if Chidinma has your heart right now, if you need to know how this ends as badly as I need to tell you, subscribe and stay with me. Because the phone was ringing, and the person about to answer it holds a secret of her own, one that is going to change how you see this entire story. Zainab Diallo had been Chidinma's closest friend for 9 years, since the day she found an exhausted young single mother crying in a hospital waiting room and simply sat down beside her and did not leave. She knew everything about Chidinma's life. Almost everything. She knew there was a father who had vanished, and she knew Chidinma's and never spoke his name, and she had her own quiet suspicions about who he might be, suspicions she had carried in silence for years because some doors are not yours to open. When she heard Chidinma's voice on the phone that night, thin and shaking, she was already reaching for her coat. "Tell me where you are," Zainab said. "I am coming for the boy. Whatever this is, you do not carry it alone." Marcus Hahn did not kill Daniel Co. on that rooftop. That was not the plan, and Hahn had waited 12 years, and a man who waits that long does not rush the ending. Instead, they took him to a warehouse by the river, an old, cold, cavernous place that smelled of rust and water, and they sat him in the hard pool of a single lamp, and Marcus Hahn pulled up a chair across from him, like an old friend settling in for a long, overdue conversation. 12 years ago, Hahn began, your father ordered a hit that went wrong.
A car.
A bridge. A woman and a child who were never the target, but who died anyway. His flat eyes did not blink. That woman was my wife. That child was my daughter. Daniel went very still. The truth hit Daniel harder than any blow Hahn's men could have landed. For 12 years he had believed Marcus Hahn was simply a rival, a debt, a monster to be managed. He had never known. His father had kept it from him, the way his father kept everything, and Daniel had built his entire sacrifice on a lie of omission so vast it reshaped the whole shape of his life. "I did not know," Daniel said, and his voice was barely a whisper. "Marcus, I swear to you, I did not know." "I believe you," Hahn said, and somehow that was worse. "That is the cruelty of it. You are guilty of nothing but being his son. And I am going to take everything from you anyway, exactly as it was taken from me. A woman, a child." He leaned forward into the light, "so that for the rest of your life, you understand precisely what you cost me." While Hahn spoke his poison in the warehouse, Chidinma did the bravest thing she had done in 12 years. She left Ethan's safe with Zainab, and she took the brass key to the address folded inside Daniel's note, a private vault behind a quiet study in a building she had walked past 100 times, never knowing it was his. The number on the key matched a long steel drawer. Her hands shook as she slid it open. Inside was not money, not jewels, just a thick folder, a small stack of photographs, and a slim black ledger, and when she opened the folder and understood what she was looking at, she had to sit down on the cold vault floor because her legs would not hold her. The photographs were of her, of Ethan, dozens of them, hundreds spanning 11 years. Ethan as a newborn she did not remember anyone photographing. Ethan's first day of school. Her own tired smile at a market stall 3 winters ago. Everyone taken from a distance, gently, by someone who had never once approached, never once interfered, only watched and made sure, and kept them safe from a shadow she never knew was there. 12 years she had believed he abandoned her. And here, in a cold steel drawer, was the evidence that Daniel Co. had never left her side for a single day. He had simply loved her from the only distance that kept her alive. Chidinma wept on that vault floor until she had no tears left. And then she got up because the ledger held the rest, and the rest was how she was going to save him. The ledger was Daniel's insurance. 12 years of it. Every one of Marcus Hahn's operations, meticulously documented, every crime, every name, every weakness, gathered patiently by a man who had always known this reckoning would come and had prepared for it in the only currency that mattered in their world. Leverage. Daniel had given her the key to the one thing that could bring Marcus Hahn to his knees. He had trusted her, over everyone, with the weapon that could end it. And underlined twice, on the last page, in his careful hand, was a single address by the river, and a time, and 3 words. If it comes to this. She knew where they had taken him. She was one woman with a ledger against an army in a warehouse, and she was going anyway, and if that does not tell you exactly who Chidinma Zola is, then nothing will. And if you are still here with me, still holding your breath through every turn of this, do one small thing so I know. Drop a comment and tell me you are still watching. Drop the single emoji that matches how your heart feels this second. Tell me where in the world you are and what time it is where you are sitting right now. And if you are watching this on your television, reach over and hit that like button so I know you are in the room. Now come with me to the river, because Chidinma Zola is about to walk into a warehouse full of dangerous men with nothing but a black book and the truth, and what she does next, no one sees coming. She did not go in through the front. She was reckless that night, but she was not a fool. She called the one number in Daniel's ledger marked differently from the rest, a private line, and she read 3 names off the last page to the man who answered, and she told him that copies of everything were already on their way to people Marcus Hahn could not buy or silence, and that unless Daniel Seo walked out of that warehouse alive, the whole edifice Hahn had spent his life building would be rubble by dawn. Then she walked up to the rusted door, alone, in the cold, and she pounded on it until it opened, and she lifted her chin and said the words that changed the balance of everything. "My name is Chidinma Zola," she said. "I am the mother of the child Marcus Hahn wants, and I have come to make a trade." Marcus Hahn turned slowly to face the woman who had walked, unarmed and alone, into the heart of his stronghold. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. This plus-size African woman with rain in her hair and a black book in her hand and absolutely no fear in her eyes, and something flickered across his face that was almost, respect. "You are either very brave," he said, "or very stupid." "I am a mother," Chidinma answered. "There is no difference." She lifted the ledger. "You know what this is." He kept it for 12 years. Copies are already gone, to journalists, to prosecutors, to the 2 rivals on page 40 who would love a reason to move on you. It all publishes at dawn unless I stop it. And I will only stop it for one thing. Across the warehouse, bound to a chair in the hard white light, Daniel saw her and his whole face broke. "No," he said, hoarse, straining against the ropes. "No, Chidinma, you were supposed to run. Why are you here? Why would you come here? Go, please, go." She did not even look at him. She could not, or she would lose her nerve, and she needed all of it. She kept her eyes on Marcus Hahn, because he was the only person in that room who could give her what she came for. "Him," she said simply. "You let him walk out with me, right now, and the ledger dies. That is the trade. Your empire, or your revenge. You cannot have both. Choose." Marcus Hahn was silent for a very long time. Chidinma could see the war in him, the thing 12 years in the making pulling against the empire of a lifetime, grief against survival, the dead wife and daughter against the living men who depended on him. She had gambled everything on a single bet that a man who had lost his whole world to one family's carelessness would not, in the end, be willing to lose everything he had left to hurt the son who had been just as blameless as his own child. She did not know if she was right. She would not know until he spoke. The work lamp buzzed. The river moved black beyond the broken wall, and Marcus Hahn finally lifted his cold, flat eyes to hers. "Cut him loose," Marcus Hahn said. The words dropped into the cold warehouse like stones into deep water. His men hesitated, and he said it again, harder, and this time they moved, and the ropes fell away from Daniel's wrists, and Chidinma felt her knees go weak with the relief so total it was almost pain. But Hahn was not finished. He crossed the floor to stand very close to her, close enough that she had to fight not to step back, and he looked down at her with those dead flat eyes. "You think you have won something," he said quietly. "You have not. I am letting him live because you have made his life more expensive than his death. But understand me, the ledger keeps him breathing. It does not make you safe. Nothing makes you safe. Not from me." Daniel crossed the floor and pulled her into him, and for the first time in 12 years Chidinma Zola let herself be held by the only man she had ever loved, and neither of them said a word, because there were no words big enough. "You came back for me," he breathed into her hair, astonished, undone. "After everything, you came back." "You never left me," she whispered. "I know that now. I saw the photographs, Daniel. I know what you did. 12 years. Her voice cracked. You loved me the whole time, and I never even knew. He pulled back just enough to look at her, and his cold, guarded face was gone entirely now, and in its place was the boy from the coat room who had told her there was not one thing about her he would make smaller. They walked out of that warehouse together into the cold, clean night, and behind them Marcus Hahn stood alone in the hard white light with his revenge unspent, and his grief no lighter than it had ever been. A man who had won and lost the same war 12 years apart. It should have been the end. In a kinder story, it would have been. But Chidinma had learned by now that her story was not kind, only survivable, and as they reached the car her whole body suddenly went cold, because a thought had struck her that she should have had an hour ago.
Zainab. Ethan.
She had told the man on the phone that copies were already sent. But she had lied. There were no copies yet. And if Marcus Hahn ever discovered that bluff, the only leverage keeping them all alive would vanish in an instant. Daniel.
She grabbed his arm.
The ledger. I told Hahn copies were already sent to break the story at dawn. But there are no copies. I made it up. It was a bluff. If he finds out before we actually send them, we have nothing. Daniel's face changed instantly, the strategist returning. Then we send them tonight, he said. Real copies, real people, before he has time to doubt you. Where is the ledger now? With Zainab, Chidinma said. I left it with her when I dropped Ethan, along with everything else in that box. She was already dialing, heart hammering. She has all of it, Daniel. She has the only copy of the only thing keeping us alive, and she does not even know what she is holding. The phone rang.
And rang. And rang.
In Zainab's living room, across the city, the phone buzzed and buzzed on the coffee table beside the open folder and the black ledger and the scattered photographs of a boy and his mother. But the room was empty. The lamp was on. A cup of tea sat cold and untouched. And the front door stood slightly, wrongly, ajar. Chidinma listened to the phone ring out into that silence and felt the whole night's victory turn to ash in her mouth. She is not answering, she whispered. Daniel. She always answers. She is not answering. But here is what Chidinma did not know, what she could not have known, sitting in that car with her heart in pieces. Zainab Diallo had not been taken. Zainab had run. The instant she truly understood what was in that folder, whose child Ethan really was, and exactly how much danger it all meant, she had done the only thing her own long-buried secret would allow her to do. She had grabbed the boy and the ledger and every photograph, and she had vanished into the night, because Zainab Diallo was not only Chidinma's best friend. 12 years ago, before she ever met Chidinma in that hospital waiting room, Zainab had worked for Marcus Hahn. She had left his service 9 years ago. She had built a whole honest life since, had loved Chidinma like a sister, had meant every moment of it. But some debts, in Marcus Hahn's world, are never truly paid, and Zainab had spent 9 years praying the past would never find her. Now it had walked into her living room in the shape of a folder, and she sat in a hidden place with a sleeping boy and an impossible choice, the ledger in her hands, her phone ringing, and ringing with her best friend's number on the screen. She could give the boy back and burn the ledger and protect the family she loved. Or she could take everything to Marcus Hahn, clear her old debt forever, and finally be free. Zainab Diallo looked at the child asleep against her side, at his soft face, at his father's eyes, and she began, quietly, to cry. Chidinma and Daniel raced across the city towards Zainab's flat, and every red light was an eternity, and every silent, unanswered ring tightened the vice around Chidinma's chest. She told Daniel everything about Zainab as they drove, 9 years of friendship, the hospital waiting room, the way Zainab had appeared in her life exactly when she needed someone most. And Daniel, who trusted no one and read every situation like a threat, went very quiet at that last part. Chidinma, he said carefully, the hospital. When you met her, was that before or after Ethan was born? Just after.
Why?
His hands tightened on the wheel. Because I have Marcus Hahn's entire network in that ledger, he said. 12 years of names. And there is a name on page 9 I have never been able to place. A woman he lost 9 years ago. He always wanted her back. Chidinma could not breathe. 9 years. The hospital. The friend who appeared at the exact right moment and never left. The woman who knew every corner of her life, who was right now, this very second, holding both her son and the only thing keeping them alive.
No, she said.
No, Daniel, not Zainab. She loves Ethan. She loves me. She would never. She is not. She cannot be. But even as she said it, she was remembering 100 small, strange moments across 9 years. 100 times Zainab had steered a conversation, or known something she should not have known, or gone quiet at the mention of a name. And the ground of her whole life, which had already shifted once tonight, shifted again. And this time there was nothing left underneath it at all. Her phone lit up in her hand. A message. From Zainab. The message was short. Chidinma read it 3 times before it made sense, and when it did she made a sound Daniel had never heard a person make. I am so sorry. I never wanted it to be like this. Ethan is safe with me. I swear it on my life. I would never let anyone hurt him. But there are things about me you do not know, and a debt I have carried since before I met you, and tonight it has all come due at once.
Do not come to the flat. Do not call the police.
Meet me where it started, just you, and I will explain everything. Trust me one last time.
Please.
He is your son's father's whole world in this book, and I am the only thing standing between all of it and Marcus Hahn. Where it started, Chidinma whispered. The hotel. The coat room. She means the hotel. It was the cruelest possible place. The hotel where it all began, where a coat room girl had bandaged a dangerous man's hand and fallen in love against every rule. Where Daniel had first said there was not one thing about her he would make smaller. And now the place where the truth about Zainab Diallo and the fate of her son would finally be decided. Daniel wanted to come in with her. Every instinct in him screamed against letting her walk in alone. But Zainab had said just you, and Chidinma understood something Daniel, in his world of force and leverage, did not. This was not going to be one with power. Zainab was not an enemy to be overwhelmed. She was a frightened woman with a wound as old as Chidinma's own, and the only thing that had ever reached a woman like that was the thing Chidinma had in endless supply.
Grace.
Chidinma stepped into the little amber-lit coat room where her whole life had changed 12 years ago, and there they were. Ethan, safe, drowsy, unharmed, sitting on the very stool where Daniel had once sat bleeding. And Zainab, standing over him like a shield, her face a wreck of guilt and terror, the black ledger clutched against her chest. For a long moment the two women simply looked at each other across the small warm room, 9 years of friendship and one enormous secret hanging in the air between them. He is safe, Zainab said, her voice breaking. I swear to you, Chidinma, I would have died before I let anyone touch him. Whatever you think of me after tonight, believe that. I believe you, Chidinma said softly. And she did. Now tell me the rest. All of it. And then let me help you. And Zainab Diallo, who had carried her secret alone for 9 long years, finally set it down. She had been young and desperate when Marcus Hahn first owned her, she said, in debt and out of options, and by the time she found the courage to run, she had already done things she could never take back. She had built a new life, a real one, and loved Chidinma truly, and never once betrayed her, not in 9 years. But 3 days ago Hahn's people had found her, and given her a choice, her old debt cleared forever in exchange for one thing. Get close to the ledger. Deliver the boy. And I could not do it, Zainab wept. I took him and I ran, and I could not do it because he fell asleep on my shoulder in the car, and he is just a baby, Chidinma, he is just a little boy, and I would rather Hahn kill me than be the reason anything happens to him. Chidinma crossed the little room and put her arms around her friend, and Zainab broke completely against her, and for a moment the two women simply held each other in the amber light while a small boy watched, and something old and poisoned finally began to heal. You did not betray me, Chidinma said fiercely into her friend's hair. You were given an impossible choice, and you chose us. Do you understand? You chose my son. That is not betrayal. That is love, Zainab. That is the bravest thing anyone has done for me tonight, and a lot of brave things have happened tonight. She pulled back and held Zainab's tear-streaked face in both hands. Now, she said, we're going to end this. All of us. Together. And Marcus Hahn is never going to touch a single person I love again. Daniel appeared in the doorway then, unable to stay away any longer, and took in the scene in an instant. The two women, the ledger, his son safe on the stool. His whole body sagged with relief at the sight of the boy, and Ethan looked up at the tall man with his own eyes and, for the first time, was not afraid. Chidinma turned to Daniel with the ledger in her hand, and the beginning of a plan in her eyes. The bluff has to become real, she said. Tonight. We take everything in this book to the people on page 40 and the journalists and the prosecutors, exactly like I told Hahn we already had. We make my lie true before he ever learns it was a lie. We take away his power to hurt us permanently, not with a threat, but with the truth, published everywhere, where he can never bury it again. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, this woman who had walked into a warehouse and out-strategized a man who had terrified him for 12 years. You are extraordinary, he said quietly. Do you know that? You always were. They did it right there, in the coat room where it all began. Daniel's contacts, Chidinma's resolve, Zainab's insider knowledge of exactly which of Han's secrets would hurt the most, all of it poured into a single irreversible act. 12 years of Marcus Han's crimes, documented, verified, attached and sent, at 4 in the morning, to a dozen people across 3 countries who could not be bought and could not be silenced. By dawn it would be everywhere. By dawn Marcus Han would be a man fighting for his own survival, with no time and no power left over to hunt a woman and a child and the man who loved them both. Daniel's thumb hovered over the send. Together, Chidinma said, and put her hand over his. They pressed it together. They walked out of that hotel as the first gray light broke over the city, for people bound together now by the longest night of all their lives. Zainab, forgiven and free, her old debt about to be buried under the collapse of the man who held it. Ethan, safe, half asleep, holding his mother's hand. Chidinma and Daniel, 12 years and one impossible truth finally behind them. It was not a perfect ending. Marcus Han was still out there, wounded and dangerous, and the morning would bring a storm of consequences none of them could fully predict. But for the first time in 12 years, Chidinma Zola walked into a sunrise without a secret weighing her down, with the father of her child beside her and her son's hand in hers. And that, after everything, felt like enough. Days later, when the storm had broken over Marcus Han exactly as they had planned, when his name was in every headline and his empire was crumbling and he had far bigger problems than an old revenge, Chidinma sat on a park bench in the soft morning sun beside Daniel's CEO and watched their son chase pigeons across the dewy grass. Ethan knew now. They had told him together, gently, that the tall, quiet man was his father, and that his father had loved him from far away his whole life to keep him safe. The boy had taken it the way children take enormous things, in pieces, over days, with questions and silences and one fierce sudden hug that had undone Daniel completely. He has your stubbornness, Daniel murmured, watching him. He has your eyes, Chidinma said. He always did. I used to hate that. It meant I could never quite forget you. Daniel turned to her then, and lifted his hand to her cheek the way he had on the rooftop, the way he had in the coat room a lifetime ago, and this time there was no danger closing in, no shadow on the stairs, nothing left to run from. I told you once, he said quietly, that there was not one thing about you I would make smaller. I meant it at 25, and I mean it now. 12 years did not change it. Nothing ever could. His thumb brushed her cheek. I am not going to disappear again, Chidinma. Not ever. If you will have me, I am going to spend the rest of my life being close enough to touch. And Chidinma Zola, who had spent a lifetime being told she was too much and never enough, looked into the eyes of the man who had only ever thought she was exactly right, and finally, let herself believe it. She kissed him as the sun came up. 12 years earlier, a coat room girl had been told by a dangerous man that there was not one thing about her he would make smaller. She had not believed him. She had spent over a decade learning, the hard way, exactly how much a person can survive and still, somehow, come out the other side with her heart intact. She had thought the Korean Mafia boss had abandoned her. She had built a whole life on that belief. And 12 years later, the truth had changed absolutely everything, not by rewriting the pain of the past, but by finally giving it meaning. He had not left because he stopped loving her. He had left because he never could. And now, in a park full of morning light, with her son laughing and her friend safe and the man she loved beside her at last, Chidinma Zola was exactly where she was always meant to be. If this story moved you, if you have followed Chidinma and Daniel all the way from that coat room to the sunrise, then do me one last kindness. Tell me in the comments what this story meant to you. Tell me if you cried. Tell me if you want more stories like this one, because there are so many more waiting to be told, and it is you right there who decides whether I get to tell them. Comment more if you want the next one, and I will see you in the next story.